And Daniel is the first of many who will, or not even the first. Yosef is the first. And the fact that it seems so strange in a society like Egypt that some poor kid is going to somehow grow up and become the second in command, and somehow he ends up being Jewish. And we always imagine, this is just Jews being, imagining that every person is, every politician, every movie star is somehow connected to the Jews. But it's not that. It really is that Yosef rises, Daniel rises. And there's something about our story that we are able to thrive as an independent commonwealth. That is the ideal. But there's a second story. And that second story is the story of Yosef, the story of Daniel, of us being able to thrive within other cultures and being able to continue the story of the Jewish people within that context as well. Okay, other points and comments? Yes?
Two questions. The number 4 shows up twice. You're talking about the 4 fast days, and then you're talking about 4 kids. I don't know if there's any relationship here between, or is it just more coincidental? And the second question is, you referred back that in Malachim that they fled Israel to go back to Mitzrayim, and yet you refer to that as Bavel.
No.
You don't traditionally think of Bavel as
Bavel is not Mitzrayim. Bavel and Mitzrayim are two different places. Bavel is Mesopotamia. Bavel is current-day Iraq,
right?
Specifically the southern area of Iraq, close to where Basra is today, a little south of that. And the area of Egypt is obviously to the south of Israel. So they're two different areas. So what happened is that the Babylonians were murdered, or the Kasdim were murdered, along with Gedaliah at that time. And they, the people who remained in Israel, were afraid of further repressions after this violent act against the Babylonians, so they flee in the other direction towards Egypt. Okay, and as far as your first question goes, as far as the number 4, the number 4 is not as pronounced in the book of Daniel, because Daniel seems being almost separate from the other 3. Daniel is the principal advisor to the king, and the other 3 wise men, or the other 3 boys, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, are typically grouped separately from Daniel. So it's really 1 and 3 as opposed to 4 as a group. And the parallel to the Arbat Somo, it's I can't say anything about that. I don't have. Yes.
Why Nebuchadnezzar attacked Israel? Is this just he was trying to conquer it, or?
So Nebuchadnezzar, like many of the Mesopotamian kings, had a great rivalry with Egypt, and those were the 2 great powers, the great civilizations of the Middle East. And if you look at demographics, that still is pretty much true, where the great river valleys are able to support great populations. And so areas like Iraq and Egypt will be able to hold a much larger population and therefore have greater power than the other areas within Mesopotamia. And the dream of the people of Iraq is always to go and to expand their kingdom to the north into the areas of Persia, and also into the south, into the east, in the west, towards Egypt. And so Nebuchadnezzar was able to conquer the area towards Egypt, eventually even to conquer the edges of Egypt itself. And that victory allowed him to further conquer the kingdoms that surrounded Egypt, which Israel was one of. And Israel was often turning towards Egypt for help in defending against these other kingdoms that came from Mesopotamia. And so Israel had a great defensive opportunity, which was that they had Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was a very difficult city to conquer because of its geographic qualities, the sharp valleys on either side, and also the strong fortifications along its northern wall. And you can even see these fortifications themselves that were created in times of Chizkiyahu in the archaeology within Jerusalem. And so the Jews were always a problem for the Mesopotamians, because they would come down, they'd conquer all these people, the Jews would flee to Jerusalem, they'd hunker down in Jerusalem, and the foreign countries could never take Jerusalem. And so Bavel says basically, we've had enough of these Jews hanging around. They go because they inevitably will conquer them, and then they will never stay conquered. We're going to level the country and basically put everybody into exile so that they'll cease to be this thorn on our side, always being between Egypt and us, forming alliances here and there. And so Bavel is motivated by, number one, being an expansionist country that's always seeking conquest, but also has a specific desire to remove the strategic threat that Jerusalem has always posed. Not in the strategic threat in the sense that it could somehow change Bavel, but strategic threat in the fact that it would always harm their ambitions towards moving further towards Egypt. Okay.
Are there any other questions? I want to thank Rabbi Struckler for coming in. I started trying to sort of go through some of these things, and it's amazing. I had to wait till I was in my 60th birth, till I started understanding history. We didn't learn this in Yeshiva. We learned a bunch of facts. And just recently, we had the Novi Shiva with Rabbi Gemara, who's going through Novi, and explaining some almost impossible to explain psuk. We had the discussion with Hanukkah, and we were looking at history. He says, it didn't just happen. Has to be an understanding. It's not just an understanding. It's an understanding so we can learn we have to live as Jews. And I think that when you have guest speakers like Rabbi Strachel come in and sort of take, maybe it's obvious to everyone else, certainly not to me, but it certainly helps me move to the next step, and that next stage. So I really want to thank him, and if we can reciprocate in any way, please call us, and again, we thank you very much.
Thank you.